The following is the personal testimony of Heather Kidd, given at Camp Veritas in August of 2009. The duration of this talk is 49 minutes.
I shortchanged my kid here. She's married. She's married to Michael Kidd. So she's actually a young kid. She's not just young. She's a young kid. Okay, so give it up, brother.
You got what it takes!
Excellent. First off, does everyone know the Camp Veritas handshake? No! I've been noticing it as I walk around and see the different groups playing. This is what I think the Camp Veritas handshake should be. You just see people naturally doing it. They're having a conversation, they're talking, and they're like... So anyway, I do have one dilemma being up here. I don't know how to tap dance, I don't know how to beatbox, and I definitely can't rap, but I will sure try. Let's open with a prayer. Whew. Thank you, Lord, so much for all these kids. They become little brothers and sisters to me, and the brothers and sisters I never had, the little ones for that matter. Thank you so much for my family and friends and wonderful husband, and please help me through this speech. Amen. All right, I determined if I can get through the first 5 minutes of this speech without throwing up, it's going to be a really good speech. So, here we go. It was very funny, actually. Today at lunch was the first time, by the way, is this too loud or it's good? In the middle of lunch today, I realized that all of a sudden I was going to give my testimony tonight, so I all of a sudden got this big, strong knot in my stomach, and it was very funny because I got a random text message from a phone number I didn't know, and it said, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I don't usually get religious text messages, but it was amazing. Literally, like, I was in the bathroom on the verge of throwing up, and I got this text message, and I found out it was actually someone I just met, and it was just amazing, exactly what I needed to hear. So, anyway. The second thing, I'm listening to Father Justin talk tonight, and he kind of took a good part of my testimony and boiled it into a homily when he talked about the 6 inches between head and heart. 12. For me, it's about like 7.5 maybe, but anyway, the major thing is, in my life, in my early life, everything I did with my faith was through my mind. I grew up in this wonderful family. I have 2 saints for parents who have really dedicated their lives to trying to make their kids saints, and I've been fortunately given a lot of good groundwork. So the first half of my life, my faith was totally my head. It was, Jesus is good, God loves me, all this stuff. But unfortunately, I didn't feel it. It was all, unfortunately, guilt and fear. I went to church every Sunday, but I literally went for the sake of not going to hell. That was what my mentality was, and I was like, you know what? If there's even a chance that I'll go to hell if I don't go, what's an hour, you know? Like, let's just play the odds. I might as well go and play it safe, you know? But that was really my mentality in going to church. Even to the point where I didn't even want to pray around my parents. Throughout high school, I went to church every Sunday, but I actually specifically would drive myself to a separate mass so that I wasn't around them. That's how much as a teenager I wanted to separate myself and wanted to play it safe, but on the same token, I did want my faith to be more of my own, but it was very much just a mental thing, and there was very little from my heart. When I was writing this speech, I was thinking about it, and honestly, our family throughout the years have had a tremendous amount of miracles happen for us. I was just thinking back, I was like, what are some of the bigger ones in my mind of my childhood, some things that stuck out? Me and Rob Young was driving, my older brother, when he was probably about 17. He's driving, my mom is in the front seat, I'm in the back seat, I don't know, 7 or 8. and we're driving our clunker car. It's a big old brown Thunderbird, otherwise known as a piece of poop on wheels. And the thing literally would die. You know, every third week we'd have to go and like bail it out, whether we needed to give the thing gas or whether it stalled somewhere. It was a big hassle. It was one of our 6 clunkers due to the fact that we had like 5 teenagers at the time who needed cars to drive. So anyway, we're in our junker car, we're driving around. All of a sudden we had one of our typical, the car stalls. Rob's driving, but where did the car stall? On train tracks. The car stalls on the train tracks. No problem, no train is coming. No problem, no sweat. All of a sudden, ding, ding, ding. You should have seen it. My mom is like starting to get pretty panicked. Rob is like starting, the car is not starting. All of a sudden the car, this is uphill. The car, and we still drive by this place like it's where we grew up. Uphill, goes up the hill, and literally it was like the movies. I'm not exaggerating. The car got off the tracks, the thing went down, the train flies by, and the beauty of the whole thing, the car is still off. The car never started, and we are off these tracks, and it is literally resting up a hill, and our car is, you know, it was phenomenal. And every time I drive by that spot, I realize the fact that, you know, that really could have been us, you know. And also the funny thing is on that car we had a nice little bumper sticker that said the angels are watching over us. They sure are. That was just one of the many times growing up. Another time that stuck out in my head, I was visiting my older sister at college, and at that time maybe I was, I don't know, 7 or 8, and we were in the Newman house, and I'm in this building, and it has stairs where, I don't know if you, basically stairs that go up, and then another set of stairs that go up one more flight, and then up here there's a fence blocking off the stairs so that no one falls down the stairs. So I'm up high, I'm up on the 2nd floor hanging out, and I'm a little kid, I'm kind of crawling, like I'm just playing with the railing. I decide to put one leg over the railing, and at this point I'm straddling the railing over a whole flight of stairs, you know, with nothing in between me and the ground. And I was obviously a dumb kid. I don't know what I was thinking doing this, but I'm kind of hanging out. All of a sudden, I somehow lost my footing, and I actually fall off the stairs. So I am falling, and at that exact moment, my sister's boyfriend, who happened to be a 6'4", like burly guy, is walking up the stairs, literally didn't see me coming down, happened to have his arms out like this, and I fell into his arms. And he was like, oh! Like, it was a total miracle. And honestly, I think God knows how much I love to play sports, because it very easily could have been a situation where I was paralyzed or I had other issues after falling that far. So that was just another thought that came to my mind. I'm like, thanks God, you know. But honestly, our whole lives, we've really had a lot of blessings from God, and that's what helped me have the mental, you know what, God is good, God does exist, God, you know, God is great. The first person as mentioned in some other testimonies in my family to transform in my family was my sister Angela. She had gone to Medjugorje, and really, she was the teenager that literally would sneak out at night. She'd crawl through the heating system, like there was kind of this like underground pathway out of our house. She would literally crawl out of it to get out at night to sneak out and hang out with her friends and do whatever. And she was that sister. At this point in time, she's our sister who homeschools her 7 kids, takes them all to Mass every day, prays the rosary at night every day. She's one of these saints that you literally, you read the books about, you know, Sister Therese and Sister, she's one of those saints, you know, probably the first to, I think she should be canonized. But seeing that type of transformation in somebody, no one goes and prays the rosary for fun, for no good reason. Like, not a downer on the rosary, it's a great thing, but there's something bigger and better out there that compels people to change their lives. You've seen it in the friars. They don't go from these lives to giving up everything to having nothing to, you know, just for the fun of it. There is something bigger and better out there, and it's obvious by watching some people's lives and how they transform. So I did believe in miracles. I ended up my junior year in college. Someone offered to send me over to Medjugorje. This has also been mentioned throughout the week, Medjugorje. I'll give you a quick little summary. Basically, there's six visionaries over there that had been seeing Mary ever since they were very little. Like there was an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 16-year-old. You know, I don't know the exact details, but basically they've been seeing Mary since then. To me, I'm very critical of things like this, and I'm like, oh, they could be making it up. Who knows? You know. But the thing to me that makes it very genuine is the fact that these same 6 kids have been seeing Mary for more than 20 years, since I think 81, and their lives have really been a witness of Christ. They're not glamorous lives. They have to tell the same story over and over and over and over again, which you know cannot be fun. They pray the rosary constantly. They're singing, they're in adoration, they're fasting twice a week or more. And these people's lives are testimonies to, you know, obviously the fact that they're seeing Mary, in my opinion. The other beautiful thing I think about Medjugorje is the amount of miracles I've heard and seen come out of the place. It's just been a really, you know, you never know if it's 100% true, but all I know is people come out of it praying and worshiping and loving Christ. So to me, that's what made Medjugorje a real, I believed it. It's genuine to me. So, but on the same token, so someone says, oh, I want to send you over to Medjugorje. At the time, I'm like, I don't want anything to change in my life. I got a really cute boyfriend, Mike. I have good friends. I'm doing well in school. Everything's great. I kind of had that mentality of once you know something's wrong, like once you find out that something's wrong, all of a sudden, then you're guilty of it. Like in terms of, if you don't know you're sinning, then it's not a sin. So I was like, please, I don't want to go to Medjugorje and find out that I got to change somehow, because then I'm going to have to, you know, change my life, and I'm perfect the way it is. Don't touch it, you know. But nonetheless, I was like, free trip to Bosnia. I won't get one every day. Let's do it. So I end up going. I show up at Newark Airport. I'm going alone, by the way, with a group of 30 adults. And I show up, and they're praying the rosary in the middle of Newark Airport. Oh my goodness. I'm 21 years old, and they're praying the rosary in the middle of Newark Airport. So I'm very self-conscious at the time. I'm embarrassed. I'm like, what did I sign up for? I can't believe I'm doing this. So, but nonetheless, I was like, you know what? $2,000 bucks. I better get my money's worth. I'm like, while I'm with these people, I'm going to do what they do and see what comes out of it. You know, I will give it my best shot. So, and on the same token, I did at that point. I had all this mental, you know, God is good, God is great, whatever. But I did want to feel it in my heart. I needed some type of motivation to feel like, why am I trying to be chaste? Why am I trying to go to church? Why am I praying? What's the point? I needed that extra motivation in my heart as to why I'm doing these things. So that's what I was really looking from Medjugorje. Also, I was looking, at the time my legs were very much hurting every time I played sports and everything else, and for a while, and to the point where I could barely run anymore. And I was like, maybe I'll go to Medjugorje, maybe God will heal my legs. Who knows? You know, that was what I was hoping for. He had a slightly different plan. So I get on this trip. There's a couple friars in my group. Father Luke, Father Luke, one of the friars, Father Luke Sweeney, not Sweeney, I'm sorry, Fletcher, is just amazing, and he was our group leader. I go to talking to him. At this point, I had very little interaction with the Catholic world outside of my family. And so I'm talking to him, I'm like, have you ever heard of Steubenville? And he's like, yeah. Have you, do you know people there? He's like, I went there. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Do you know my brother Rob Young? Because Rob went there. I was on the same floor with him, and I was actually friends with him. And I was like, oh, wow. So you really realize quickly, and that's not, once you get tuned into the religious things going on, you'll realize it's a very, very small world. So nonetheless, I went to confession on one of the first nights there with Father Luke, and it was one of those confessions where you confessed everything. And I also challenged him. There were problems in my mind with, why does the Catholic Church teach this? Why is this so hard? Why is God making my life so hard by creating all these rules? Through a very conversation with someone who really knew their faith, it really came to very clear to me why God has all these rules. Honestly, there's not one teaching in the Catholic Church that doesn't form us to really have a healthy, wholesome, happy life. And it might seem hard on the surface, it might take discipline on the surface, but it really does amount to us having just really joyous lives, like Ryan talked about. Not happy lives, but really lives filled with joy. So through my conversation with Father Luke on my beginning, that confession was major to getting those shades taken off of me to be able to see God's love. One thing that happens over in Medjugorje, you hear about the miracle of the sun. Honestly, going over there, I could give a crud. I really did not, cool, the sun spins, whatever, to me that wasn't enough. Why does that make me want to not, make out with Mike too long? That, it really did not have any connection with me in terms of what's going to motivate me, And so, nonetheless, so I get over that. I'm actually with somebody else, and we're walking up this cross mountain, and I'm like, so yeah, have you heard about this miracle of the sun? Like, what do you think of this? Blah, blah, blah. And he's like, yeah, actually, I saw it once, and blah, blah, blah. And, we get to the top, and it was funny because it was on my mind at that point. I was like, it'd be funny if the miracle of the sun were happening right now, and I didn't care so much that I didn't bother to look up and see it. So I look up at the sun. The miracle of the sun was not happening. It was bright, it was piercing, it was a normal, 12 o'clock noon sun piercing my eyes, and I was like, oh, what bad idea, screw that, sorry. I was like, the miracle of the sun is not happening. So I go, I kneel down, I pray, and the beauty of Medjugorje, I started to pray constantly and more than I had ever prayed before. And it was just kind of the thing you do, and I just fell right in place and tried, So I'm praying, and all of a sudden this Irish guy, like about 20 minutes later, comes and starts poking me, and he's like, come look. And I'm like, what's going on, I look up, and there were about maybe 10 of us on the top of this mountain, and he's like, look. And the sun, it was beautiful. The sun was there. It was not a cloud in the sky. And in the center of the sun was basically a host. There was almost like a cross in the middle and a host covering out the center of the sun. And around the edge of the sun, it was still regular sun, and it was spinning, like crazy spinning, like. And we're all staring at this, and I'm like, do you see this? And we're all comparing, like, does it look like a host? Like, we're all trying to see, am I really seeing this? Because this is crazy. And it was, to me, the thing that really made this is definitely the miracle of the sun, is the fact that, 20 minutes ago, I couldn't even glance at the sun without hurting my eyes, and now I'm staring at it without a cloud in the sky, with a host in the middle of it, with this it was really phenomenal. And on the same token, it was just one of those cool extra reminders, oh, God does exist, that's pretty cool. Another cool thing in Medjugorje, which I thought was interesting, they have this big, it's made out of, I don't even know, steel or something, cross. It's a resurrected Jesus. Essentially what it is, it's on the ground, is a big steel, picture a big rectangle, and out of it is the Jesus, so you can see Jesus is up in a cross position, but you can still see his imprint in the ground, so it's Jesus resurrected from the cement. And the thing that's interesting with this statue is out of the knee, there's drips of water coming out of it. And these drips of water have been tested by scientists, and they're the same consistency as human tears. And what's also very cool, you can go up to it, you're touching it, I'm like, wow, that's cool, and I'm trying to figure out where it's coming out of. I'm like, there has to be a sprinkler in there. But what I've heard is that the statue is filled up to his waist with cement, and in times of drought, this thing is still dripping, and it's like drip, 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 drip. Like, it's very spontaneous and cool. And so I'm touching it, I'm blessing, I'm like, yeah, cool. And it was pretty neat. On the same token, so I'm around, I'm talking to Father Luke later that day, and I'm like, what's up with, actually, I think it was someone else who was talking about it, and they're like, why are the tears coming out of his knee? And I'm like, oh, because Jesus had a wound there. And Father Luke's like, Heather, he he's like, brush up on your Catholic history. I don't think Jesus had like a specific wound on his knee, like different than somewhere else. You know, I was just like, oh, obviously, you know, didn't they gash him there? That was his big wound, you know? So no, apparently that was not the big wound. So he's like, honestly, I was thinking about the same thing, and he was trying to come up with an explanation. And he's like, when I was praying about it, he's like, I pictured Mary wrapping her arms around Jesus and crying on his knee. And I was like, wow. I was like, I think I've seen a painting like that in my life. And I was like, that's beautiful, you know? And about a half an hour later, I started feeling guilty. I was like, did I just make that up to be like conversational? Like, I don't know that I've ever seen a painting with Mary wrapped around Jesus' legs. I was like, I've seen her by the foot of the cross, I've seen her, you know, but I've never seen her wrapped around Jesus' legs. So I'm in church that evening, and I think that's kind of when I was thinking about it. And I look up, and there's like, in this chapel, there's like 20 stained glass windows, little tiny ones up across both sides, all the way down the church. And the first thing I see is a stained glass window with Mary wrapped around Jesus' legs, crying on his knee. And to me, that was like, oh, whew, you know, cool, you know. And so that was a little confirmation there. It was also very funny. The next day, I kind of asked a random guy, too, because I was like, I wonder if everyone thinks that's what it is. So I asked this random kid, and I was like, what do you make of it, you know? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, but I asked this Bosnian kid, and he said that he thinks it's Mary wrapped around Jesus' legs, crying on his knee. Like in the exact same wording, and I was like, wow, okay, that's what it is. So that was just very cool. So I'm in Medjugorje. All of a sudden, there's this giant priest walking around. The guy is 300 pounds, 6'5", like the biggest priest you will ever see. And I'm like walking around. I'm going in the little bar things. I'm like 20, I think. I was almost 21, so I felt cool because I could drink, and I'm in a different country, and I can drink legally at that point. And this guy, he says, you sit. And I was like, okay, sure, you know. So I sit down. I don't know anyone anyway, so I might as well, you know. I'm talking to him, and this man, he was like, it turns out his story in brief is he's a college football player out in Minnesota, and he got recruited by the NFL. Meanwhile, that was his plan. He's into the obvious drinking, drugs, girls, whatever. And he ends up, his mother had been to Medjugorje 74 times, so, which also happened to be his football number. So on number 74, she finally convinces him to come over there. He's over there. He's in one of these like charismatic masses, and the priest is praying over everybody, and he's praying over this paralyzed guy's knees and legs. And so he's helping out the priest. I think he was like the altar boy or whatever. And the priest keeps praying over this paralyzed person's knees and legs, knees and legs, knees and legs. And Father's saying to himself, come on. And by the way, he's just Mike at this point. Mike is, come on, Father, can you move it along? Like, I'm getting old here, you know, come on. Half an hour passes. This priest is still praying on the same person. Knees, legs, knees, legs. Finally, Father hears his voice in his head. If I make this person walk, will you become a priest? And Father said, no. If I make this man walk, will you become a priest? And he goes, sure, God, give it your best shot. All of a sudden, literally right then, that person got up, walked around the entire church, and sat back down. At that point, Father had a number of curse words that he literally said at the tabernacle, like, ever, and walked out of the chapel. And at that point, but you can see, he's a priest now. there's something real there, you know. No one goes from an NFL football player to a priest for no reason. And to me, that's what a witness is. So on one of, I won't touch on this part too much, but one of my main experiences was in church when I basically for once realized for the first time the love of Christ. Everything that Ryan and really everyone's been talking about the whole time, Jesus died for me. And it was the first time I realized that in my whole life. And of course I'm sitting in church and I'm bawling and I'm really embarrassed because I'm crying everywhere. But for the first time it hit me, Jesus died for me. And at that point I was ready to change my life. I was like, this is what it's about. on the same token, I had a lot of anxiety because I'm like, I'm going to go back home, and I know what it feels like to be on a retreat and go back home and not have that same experience and very easily be pulled into something else. So later in the week, I run into Father Mike again, who, by the way, he's from Minnesota, so a very random group, and like different from mine. And he's like, I'm supposed to, like, meanwhile in my head, I'm like, I'm supposed to pray with this guy. And he comes up to me, he's like, I'm supposed to pray with you. And I'm like, oh, I was going to tell you that. So we go into this chapel, and there's like, 20 people around. And he's like, this is the relic of the real cross. And it's basically one of these big metal crosses, but he opens up the back and he shows me basically a splinter. And I'm like, Father, you got that off the internet. Like, give me a break. Like, this is not real. And nonetheless, I found out soon enough, I believe it was real. I was like, come on. So he's like, no, take this, hold it to your heart. So I take this metal cross, I'm holding it to my heart. And he put like 2 fingertips on my head and a couple fingertips on my back. And he starts praying. And honestly, I'm expecting, if anything, maybe to feel slightly emotional, because that's what I do if I get really deep in prayer. Or I'm like, maybe God will heal my legs. That's what I came here for, isn't this what it's about? So he starts praying, open her heart, show her your love, open her wounds, show her your love, Lord, open her heart. And then he starts praying in tongues, and I won't even try to imitate that. And so I'm like, and I feel nothing. I have never felt less emotional in my whole life. I'm sitting there like, I want to be deep in prayer. And I'm like, nothing. All of a sudden, it was a couple minutes in, when I started feeling this swirling sensation in my temple and this sensation in my side. And the sensation was very faint at first, and it started getting deeper and deeper. And then it started to cover my face. And it was like the most amazing sensation I've ever felt in my life. It was not a sensation I had ever experienced up until that point. It felt like hot water kind of being electrocuted like this, but like on top of my face, but in a good way. And it also I just felt streaks across my back, and it started to spread across my stomach in a couple streaks. And I'm holding this cross, and it spread down my arms all the way to my fingertips. And it stopped at my waist. And of course I'm saying to God, don't forget about my legs. I came here for my legs, But there's nothing in my legs, no good feeling, nothing. And then all of a sudden my calf muscles start tightening up like Charlie horses. I don't know if you've ever had a Charlie horse, but my calf muscles were both like really, really, really tight, and I couldn't relax them. And they're just super tight. And my breathing starts to feel like I've been running. I'm just sitting there like, what's going on? But I'm very relaxed, and I'm just kind of letting things go. And I start feeling like, essentially start breathing as if I've been running. And I'm like, but I can't slow down my breathing. I just feel like I don't have quite enough oxygen. So I'm praying at this point. Basically, this sensation that's everywhere, it is the best sensation I have ever felt. I feel like Christ is literally there, like on top of me, and it's a physical sensation. It's not like this faint, like, oh, I'm like thinking of this. It was like this strong sensation that I've never felt before. And so I start begging him. I'm like, please don't go. Please don't go. Stay here. Please don't go. And I'm like scared that it's going to stop any minute, and it's the best feeling I've ever had in my life. So I'm just, please don't go. Please don't go. Take me with you. Please take me with you. And I'm like, God, I want to die right now. Please take me with you. And I'm begging. And I honestly think that God might be... I literally thought he might strike me dead right then, and that would be that. Like, I believed it, because all this stuff going on, I'd never experienced. I'm like, maybe this is what death is like. So I'm just begging, please take me with you. After a minute or so, nothing happened. So at that point, I concluded, I'm not dying now. But the thing that was clear to me at that point, when I'm begging him, and honestly, when I think back to this story 4 years later, the thing that always reminds me how real it was is the fact that I was so happy with my life. Everything, honestly, could not have been better. And yet I literally wanted to die and go home with the Lord right then. And I even in my mind was considering, oh, that means I can't say goodbye to my parents. I can't say goodbye to Mike. No offense, but I was like, it was that strong, and that's what I remember back, is that it was that strong, that's how I felt. And so nonetheless, I didn't die. I'm sitting there. Everything still continues. At this point, my arm starts to become so heavy that I'm holding this cross, and my whole body, I'm breathing, and my legs are still super tight. My thighs are like super tired, and the sensation is still happening everywhere. It's amazing. So at this point, I can't even hold up this cross to my heart anymore. And I basically take it out of this hand and I put it in this hand. And at this point, I'm kind of hunched over like this. And meanwhile, when I took the cross out of this hand, my hand was like paralyzed like this. And I couldn't move my fingers and I couldn't move my wrist, and everything was just like stuck. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, am I making this crap up? Like, I don't know what's going on, you know? So I literally, at that point, I held the cross to my knee, and I took my other hand and I'm trying to pry my fingers open, like to see, like, is this just a mind trick? Like, what is going on? And my fingers still won't budge. So I'm like, okay, whatever. So I'm still praying. The sensation that's going on very much outweighed the paralyzed hand. So anyway, what do you say? I know. I thought I'd give you a little surprise, right? Ryan's never sat down and listened long enough to hear this story. No offense. No, I'm a listener. Ryan's a talker. That's the way it is. So nonetheless, Father Mike comes back at this point, and I'm like exhausted. I'm holding this cross. The sensation's still going on, and he goes, Heather, just keep the cross for the rest of the day. No, he goes, keep the cross. Just get it back to me later. Meanwhile, in my head, I'm like, I don't have this guy's number. I'm in a different country. I have no idea where he's staying. I am leaving tomorrow, and, you know, I'm screaming in my head. I don't borrow a pair of socks because I'm too stressed out that I might not get them back to the person, much less someone's relic of the real cross. Like, so at this point, I'm screaming in my head, like, don't go, Father, I want to give it back, like, you know, and my body would not physically respond to him. I kind of halfway turned my head, gave a half smile, and then I'm assuming he left because, you know, that was that. So, at this point, I'm like praying, and I'm like, Lord, I'm ready to help you with your cross. I'm willing to do anything for you. And I have this like unselfish like thing that I'm not typically like. And I'm like, Lord, I want to do anything for you. I want to do everything for you. And it was this type of love that I personally have never, it wasn't a human love. Like, I love people. I'm willing to do a lot of things for people. But it was this love for Christ that, like, I really never, I didn't have it before. So, and even to the point where I'm looking at my contorted hand, my calves are still super tight, and I'm like, you know what, Lord? Even if my hand's like this the rest of my life, and my calves are like this, you know, that's fine. And it wasn't even like, I'll sacrifice this for you, Lord. It was like, I can't wait to walk around with my contorted hand and my calves because I love you so much, Lord. Like, it was, and this is not me. Like, this is obviously God making me feel like this because this is not my natural self, you know, but I really, honestly, I was like, oh, I can't, like, with all the sensation and honestly all the pounding, the, you know, sensation still going on in my face and my arms and everything else, to the point where I'm still, you know, I want to do this. And everything else just seemed very insignificant. I'm like, I'm willing to do anything for you, Lord. Throughout that whole time, I did feel very perfectly conscious. I knew there were people in the church. I knew everything was going on, but I physically couldn't change the things that were happening to my body, and to me, that's what made it feel real. So at this point, I'm a nurse, and I'm thinking, I'm like, God, like, why? This is, like, I didn't understand why he did the things he did. I'm like, why my temple? Why my side? I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, why am I breathing like this? Why aren't you healing my legs? And all of a sudden, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was like, oh. I was experiencing every symptom, sign and symptom almost, of hanging on a cross. It just hit me. I'm like, oh, crown of thorns. Oh my gosh, he got hit in the side. And the reason why it's not my legs, I'm holding myself up on this cross. Thank God it was a much more pleasant experience than the cross. But every single sign and symptom fell into place. I was like, oh, the streaks down my back, that must have been where they whipped him. The streaks across my stomach of that sensation, that must have been where they, whipped him there. And even, every single little bit of the puzzle, why am I so exhausted? Why can I not even hold my body up? And I'm sitting in this pew at church, every symptom of hanging on the cross. And honestly, there wasn't a piece that didn't fit to me. And I was like, whoa, that's cool. And even my hand being paralyzed, I was like, why is it paralyzed like this, And I'm assuming it was somewhat like that when he was hanging on a cross, but it was very cool because all these things happened. And it wasn't until afterwards that I was like, oh my gosh, like, that's what that meant, So anyway, this overwhelming peace continued. At about a half an hour from it starting, I finally was like, you know what, Lord, I'm ready. I'm ready to do anything you want me to do. And I was honestly expecting everything to turn off like a light switch. But it was about a minute later and everything on my body came back to normal. And I was somewhat surprised. I could move my hand and my calves were normal. And I was like, oh, at the same time, I was like drained. Like my whole body just felt drained. And now I have this relic of the real cross that I'm supposed to find this giant priest to give back to. So I start like wandering around Medjugorje in this half days from this whole experience, and I'm like, I need to find him. I don't know where to even begin looking. I'm out in these fields, I'm like, didn't he say he was staying with one of the visionaries? So I'm wandering around, and I'm like, you know what? I was like, Lord, I'm obviously going to run into him if I'm supposed to give him his cross back, and if I don't, no, I'm just kidding. So I go back to my cabin. Anyway, that night, obviously, I walk into one of the 40 bars in Medjugorje, and the first person I see is giant Father Mike. And I was like, cool, okay. So the funny thing is, on my way into that bar, these random people from different countries who I had never met before were coming up to me and saying, literally, one would come up to me and say, you're glowing. I was like, all right. Another random person, half an hour later came up to me, you're glowing, did you know that? And I'm like, creepy. Then I go see Father Mike, who he obviously knew this whole thing was going on, and his words exactly, you're glowing. And I was like, oh my gosh. So at that point I was like, wow. So the funny part is, I go home. A month later, I run into one of my best friends that I hadn't seen in a very long time. I go to see him. I see him. The first thing he says to me, you're glowing. Did you know that? And I've never heard him use those words. And I was like, oh my gosh. It was very cool, to say the least. So from that whole experience, I can tell you it has flipped my life upside down. It took my faith from my mind to my heart. And I'm very, very much in love with our Lord. The ways that I church beforehand, and honestly to this day, sometimes to me can be dry. It depends on what's going on, it depends on the homily, but the part that's not dry is Jesus is there. And I crave him, and I'm very thankful to be a nurse because I get multiple days off during the week. And I do love to go to daily mass every time I have off and receive the Eucharist, because I can tell you what a difference it makes in my everyday life, in my attitude, and just receiving the Eucharist is just very, very much changing, and I crave him. I'm in love with the man. No offense, Mike. He's my second man. The rosary as well, I very much find it a spiritual exercise. Sometimes it is very enjoyable. Other times, it's like exercising. When you run a mile, it's like exercise. At the end of the mile, though, you're like, whew, I feel good. And at the end of the week, you're like, wow, I look good. But that first mile when you're running it, you're like, this is terrible, And to me, I hope this is not offensive to you, Lord, but the rosary is very similar. At points, it can be painful for me, but it is a spiritual exercise that literally strengthens your soul to the point where at the end of the week, you look fine from doing the rosary. And the other thing I thought was funny is the Lord very much, my parents always said, oh, the Lord will talk back to you if you pray to him. And I'm like, I don't hear anything. Like, give me a break, Mom and Dad. Like, come on. But it's very true. Honestly, if you start asking the Lord questions, he will answer you in very, very clear ways. I Twitter with God every day, all day long, and some questions I've asked him. I'm going to go find an apartment down on Long Island, and I'm like, you know what, Lord? I really like this blue carpet I had in college. Like actually my roommate had it, but I didn't have it. Not my roommate, my housemate. And I was like, and I'm like, how am I going to know where you want me to live? What apartment am I going to live in? Like, how will I know that it's the right one? You know what, Lord? If you put a blue carpet like that in that apartment, like in my room, I'll know that that's the right one. And honestly, I was very nervous making that whole suggestion because I'm like, I really don't want to find a great apartment and turn it down because it doesn't have this stupid blue carpet. You know, I didn't want to make that whole exchange with God. But I was like, you know what, God, if you find an apartment with a whatever. So I go look at it, like hundreds of apartments. I finally come to this one, and it is gorgeous. It is top of the line, different than the rest. And I'm like, sweet apartment, and it's cheaper too. So the funny thing, I go, I look, I sign the lease, and then I'm like, oh, you know what? Let me just go and check out the room one last time so I can get measurements, so I can figure out, you know, how to fit my furniture in here. I go back in the room, and I notice the blue carpet right in my room. So it was just great because I had totally even forgot that whole exchange with the Lord, and he answered my question very clearly. Another interesting time in my post-Medjugorje life, I'm giving an abortion talk at college, which, by the way, I'm not a public speaker. This is officially the second time I've talked to more than 5 people at once. And I'm in college. I'm giving this very, like, the beauty is when you're fighting abortion and you're talking about it, when you're right, it's very easy to have a debate. So it's very easy to, you know, when there's logic behind what you're saying, it's very easy to have the debate. So the debate went relatively well, somewhat scary to start out talking. Anyway, I leave the debate. I'm in the middle of this engineering building, which is total cement. The entire place is cement. Only boys, really, mostly at Binghamton were engineers. I look down at the ground. There's a little baby blue sock. A little baby's blue sock in the middle of Binghamton University's engineering building as I leave my abortion debate. And it was kind of like a little thing from God saying, right on, you know. And it was very, you know, I do believe he speaks to us when we ask him questions. Every single decision I've made in my life since has been what I hope is God's will. When you ask him, where am I supposed to work? Who am I supposed to marry? Where am I supposed to live? He really does answer. Honestly, when I met Mike, I thought he was just like this really cute athletic jock, and I was like, oh, like, you know, he's great, like, but I only knew his surface qualities, and yet I was praying to God, please find me a really faith-filled husband, find me a saint, you know. And honestly, I didn't know, Mike is the biggest saint of everybody I've ever met. He really, and the reason why he's a saint, he's so humble that you don't even know how faith-filled he is. You know, he's like this undercover, like, I'm totally going to blow up your spot, but, you know, he's like in his car praying the rosary in the morning, and then, like, you know, praying it on the way home, and no one knows. Not one of our friends that we've had for 6 years know that, you know. And he's definitely an undercover saint. Even when you see him around here, he's not the Lion of Judah, you know, he's not, which, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm like that, I'm the Lion of Judah, you know, but Mike is the undercover saint, and the reason why he is because he really is in love with the Lord, and he's very humble in it. And he is a saint because he lives with me every day, and you have no idea. You have no idea. Anyway, lastly, before my last closing, since my Medjugorje experience, really, once you know the Lord and you're in love with the Lord, there's no reason to have any fear. I can't say I'm perfect at this. I do get anxiety about certain things, but if the Lord's in charge, there's nothing to fear. I'm going to close with what I thought was also very interesting. I would say a couple months after I got back from Medjugorje, I was reading one of my books, like a random book, and I found this letter inside my book, and it's signed by God. I honestly didn't make much of it. I assume someone wrote it and put it in my book. But nonetheless, I still don't know who wrote it. My dad denies it, right? I really don't honestly know who wrote it, and it is one of the most beautiful things I've ever read. It does seem to apply to women a little bit more, but let me just read it, because I'll close on what I think is more of his words than mine, at least. My daughter, I am your father, and I love you. There may be times when you question my love. Know that my love for you is real. I give myself to you freely, without hesitation. I give all of myself to you totally, without reservation. My love for you is everlasting, and nothing will stop me from loving you. My daughter, I love you in all your totality. I created you, and behold, you are very good. You are unrepeatable. You are irreplaceable. You are great in your uniqueness. At the moment you were conceived, I cradled you in my hand, held you to my heart, and kissed you. Then I placed you in your mother's womb so you would be presented to the world as the glorious daughter of God. Precious you are to me in your femininity. I created you with a feminine genius. As women, you proclaim to the world what it means to be human. In your body, your glorious body, you are assigned to the world that every person is called to be open and receptive to my love, and for those who accept my love, they will enter into new life. They will become eternally united with me and eternally divine. I bless your beautiful body. In your body, you have the power to receive love and then conceive new human life within you. In your body, I give you the gift to turn love into new life. I bless your beautiful anatomy. I bless your beautiful womb. I bless you in your feminine nature, your maternal nature. You know the preciousness of life and love. You know how to nurture and protect the lives entrusted to you. You know the power of patience, selflessness, tenderness, suffering, and forgiveness. You feel within your feminine heart how deep love can go. And with this maternal genius, you can freely and lovingly shape others into the people they were created to be. Embrace your femininity. Exclamation point. My daughter, in this world you have been taught to reject your femininity. You have been told that your genius is a weakness. You have been told to reject your maternal nature and end your maternal body. You have been told that to be a fulfilled woman, you must adhere to a certain idea of superficial beauty. You have been told to settle for men who do not know how to love you and your femininity, men who do not know what it means to lay down their lives for you, men who only wish to use you. Rebuke these lies. You are my masterpiece. Behold, you are very good and worthy of the best. My daughter, when you are challenged, look to the Blessed Virgin Mary. She is your mother. She will help you. Evil and lies flee at the sound of her name because she embodies what it means to be woman. She said yes to receiving my love, and she conceived my son, Jesus, within her. She shaped him into the man he needed to be as the Savior of the world, who laid down his life for you, his bride. When you receive my son in the Eucharist, open your beautiful feminine heart and body to receive our love. Let us bless you and affirm you. You are my masterpiece. I will protect you. I love you. Live in my love. Your eternal Father.